if a person falls, they are fighting the fall. I mean, they don't just drop back. You know, if you're falling back, there's an effort to.
You think you know Alfred Hitchcock, the master of suspense, but what you don't know is hiding behind one innocuous door in his English mansion. In 1942, Hitchcock secretly commissioned a clandestine office tucked away upstairs, a room so well camouflaged that even his closest friends never suspected its existence. Complete with plumbing for a private bathroom, it became the womb of his most chilling nightmares and the birthplace of legendary horror. Fast forward to 2023. When the estate sold for $8.81 million, new owners unlocked the concealed chamber and stumbled upon artifacts that will reshape everything you believed about the iconic director. What mysterious scripts, forgotten props, and spine-tingling blueprints lie within those sealed walls? Stick around, because what we uncovered inside Hitchcock's hidden lair will haunt you forever. Above a little shop in Leytonstone, Essex, Alfred Hitchcock came into this world on August 13, 1899. His mother was very devoutly Catholic, and his father was in charge of the store. Alfred learned to dread from a young age, being the youngest of 3 children. His father left a message for him to go to the police station when he was 5 years old. "This is what we do to naughty boys," the cops said as they briefly confined him to a cell, a memory that would stay with him forever. He lived with a crippling phobia of police officers throughout his youth, which he eventually infused into his films. He was a reserved, submissive kid who spent most of his time alone. As a result of his social isolation and his father's description of him as "my little lamb without a spot," Alfred enrolled at the rigorous Jesuit school St. Ignatius College when he was 11 years old. Students were in constant fear in the hours leading up to the conclusion of the school day, since punishments were not random, but rather planned. Fear, control, and suspense were concepts that Hitchcock supposedly picked up at this school. The soaring twin towers of St. Ignatius Church were a daily sight for him. They eventually served as the inspiration for the surreal spire in his film Vertigo. He credited the Jesuits with teaching him all that I know about suspense and fear. But his Catholic guilt stayed with him and shaped his moral compass and perspective on punishment. Hitchcock lost his father when he was 15 years old. Alfred had to drop out of school and get a job after the family's devastating loss. However, he had started studying sound, electrical, and mechanics a year earlier at a Poplar Engineering School's night sessions. For a pitiful 15 shillings per week, he found work as a technical clerk with Henley's Telegraph and Cable Company. Although unglamorous, it served to unlock the door. The advertising department was his first exposure to visual communication when he was working there as an ad designer. He persisted in his nighttime studies, expanding his curriculum to include art, history, economics, and politics. War was not his choice. He was no longer suitable for manual labor by 1917, when he reached the age of 18. His leg coverings were coming down, so he joined a cadet group, but most of the members laughed at him. After Watu, when most people were focusing on getting their lives back together, Alfred Hitchcock was busy seeing movies continuously. On weekends, he would watch an endless stream of flicks. However, he wasn't your average moviegoer. Instead, he meticulously examined each frame, scene, and action. Shadows, tension, and unusual perspectives were apparent to him in German expressionist films. Even the American cinema magazines were read by him. Even though he had never set foot on a film set before, he possessed the eye of a filmmaker by 1920. He understood the power of a shot and how to make a scene stick in your memory. At the age of 21, he took the first step in 1920. He brought a portfolio of drawings for the film's title cards to famous Players Lasky Studios in Islington, which was titled The Sorrows of Satan. After hearing that they were working on a different project, he went home to design fresh title cards and returned to the studio. he got the job. He first held down a part-time job in addition to his full-time one at Henley's. He even struck a bargain with his advertising manager. They would divide his film salary in exchange for after-hours access to Henley's gear. Hitchcock had settled into a full-time role with the studio by 1921. Films such as Dangerous Lies and The Great Day used his title card designs. Hitchcock remained with the company even after they downsized. He then began to write screenplays and create sets. His learning curve was steep in 1922 when he worked on 6 pictures for Gainsborough Pictures. Number 13, a drama about working-class Londoners living in a building, was his first feature-length film script that he attempted to direct that year. The first funding he received from his uncle quickly dried up. The actress Claire Greet had such faith in him that she loaned him her life money to keep the show on the air, but it still wasn't enough. The picture came to a halt after just 2 reels, or around 25 minutes. The video vanished. Its whereabouts remain unknown. Hitchcock referred to it as chastening and hardly touched on it thereafter. When Alfred Hitchcock oversaw the German and Italian production of The Pleasure Garden in 1925, everything changed. Before the British Embassy rescued the group, he ran into financial difficulties and was even stranded in Munich. Despite his panic incident while riding a cable car in the Alps, the film had already been completed. His passion for dramatic lighting, suspenseful scenes, and visual storytelling was on full display. There was no denying the impact of European cinema. Despite its delayed debut until 1927, it signified the true start. Although Jack the Ripper and Hitchcock's East End upbringing served as inspiration for The Lodger, a tale set in foggy London alleyways, the director finally achieved success with this picture. A murderer-in-waiting whose identity remained a mystery was the protagonist of the story. Michael Balcon, a believer in Hitchcock, fought for its release over studio disapproval, which they attributed to the film's perplexing plot points. The crowd went wild. A groundbreaking approach that impressed observers was the use of a glass floor to record the lodger pacing above. In that picture, Hitchcock also made his debut cameo appearance, a practice he would continue in almost all of his subsequent films. Hitchcock had finally arrived with the February 1927 opening of The Lodger. The noise then followed. Hitchcock directed the 1929 film Blackmail. The studio requested that he transition to sound midway through the film, as it had begun as a silent feature. The main actress's heavy Czech accent was the issue. An actress read the words off-camera as Hitchcock lip-synced. Dubbing has its origins in this manner. Hitchcock amplified the sound of a single word, knife, while silencing all others in a scene where a lady, haunted by remorse after stabbing a man, sits at the breakfast table. For the first time ever, a character's inner turmoil could be conveyed through sound. Costing £25,000 to produce, the picture grossed almost £125,000. The first sound hit for British film came from Hitchcock, who transformed a technical difficulty into a masterwork. The narrative of Alfred Hitchcock started to take a turn on December 2, 1926, when he wed Alma Reville in South Kensington, London. This wedding marked the beginning of a remarkable creative relationship in cinematic history. It was more than simply a wedding. Alma was more than simply his wife. She had been a film actress since the age of 16. She was well-versed in the field, having weathered layoffs, hostile studio environments, and a male-dominated sector. Alma did all the heavy lifting behind the scenes, including editing, scripting, and even finding Hitchcock's little faults, while Alfred became the public face of their films. Her contributions were crucial to the success of films such as Shadow of a Doubt, Suspicion, and The 39 Steps. She had Hitchcock's utmost faith, since she didn't care about recognition. She only wanted the job done well. Patricia, their daughter, was born only 2 years after that, on July 7, 1928. During Patricia's formative years, her family resided in an apartment on London's Cromwell Road. She had an extraordinary upbringing, though. Carrying the bride's train at a famous wedding was just one of the beautiful occasions in which she participated at the tender age of 3. For her, that was par for the course. She began her Broadway playing career in a play named Solitaire when she was just 14 years old. She traveled to London in 1947, fresh out of high school in Los Angeles, to enroll in the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art for acting. Stage Fright, Strangers on a Train, and Psycho were the 3 films in which she later featured, and she also appeared in many episodes of Alfred Hitchcock Presents. She wed Joseph E. O'Connell Jr. in 1952, and the couple produced 3 children together. At that point, Hitchcock was more than a name on a label. It was a legacy in and of itself. The world around Patricia, though, was shifting as she grew up. A nervous Europe was on the brink of war. It was a decision that would alter the course of his life. Hitchcock understood it and relocated to Hollywood in 1939. He had previously planned to direct his final British picture, Jamaica Inn, in 1938, but he boarded the RMS Queen Mary and set sail for America after finishing filming. Even before he began working there, he had already met major figures in the business, given interviews, and been featured in magazines in the U.S., so the press there had already treated him like a superstar. Meeting with David O. Selznick, a major Hollywood producer, and accepting his 7-year deal was the turning point. Hitchcock would pocket $40,000 for each film, which is over $890,000 in today's dollars. The timing couldn't have been better. War was looming over Europe, and Hitchcock had just achieved artistic and financial security in the United States. The stark contrast shocked him and his family when they relocated to Los Angeles. It was easier, quicker, and cheaper to create movies in Hollywood. At last, he had found an environment that allowed his mind to roam freely. There was a watershed moment when Life magazine hailed him as the greatest master of melodrama in screen history that very year. But there were some bumps along the road. It wasn't easy for Hitchcock to work with Selznick, since Selznick was so much louder and more theatrical than Hitchcock. A disagreement arose about the scripts, the revisions, and the decision-maker. Nevertheless, Hitchcock persisted. Alfred Hitchcock didn't come to Hollywood in 1939 with the intention of becoming its dominant force. In fact, he felt out of place. After his debut American picture, Rebecca took home the prize for Best Picture at the 1941 Academy Awards on February 27th. Everything changed. It was a monumental occasion, with the exception of Hitchcock, who did not get the Academy Award for his work. John Ford won Best Director, and it was the first oddity in a long series. Although he didn't, his films continued to garner accolades. And what's strangest, Rebecca was someone whom Hitchcock despised. Producer David O. Selznick had complete creative control and made sure that Hitchcock followed the novel exactly as written, which is why the picture wasn't really his film, as he put it. Hitchcock stayed silent about the picture for a long time because he found the conflict between him and the producer so excruciating. The Academy Award went to Selznick, while the credit and bitterness went to Hitchcock. In the midst of Europe's worsening conflict, Hitchcock began producing thriller after thriller. He released a total of 8 features between 1940 and 1945. The second one, Foreign Correspondent, was published a few months subsequent to Rebecca. It directly addressed the conflict, prior to America's involvement, in an unfiltered manner. Bombs detonated over London, and a rallying cry for American intervention marked the film's climax. It received another Best Picture nomination and had a production budget of $1,084,067. It was unusual for Hitchcock to have 2 pictures competing for the top prize in the same year. Next was 1941's Suspicion, which was Hitchcock's sole acting Oscar winner and starred Joan Fontaine. Shadow of a Doubt, nevertheless, was Hitchcock's favorite film of 1943. Together with writer Thornton Wilder, he succeeded in capturing the essence of a classic American small town. In plain sight, under that placid exterior, lurked a murderer. Despite Hitchcock's adjustment to his new nation in these wartime pictures, his preferred themes of guilt, anxiety, and danger remained unchanged. Rope followed in 1948. At least that's how it appeared. Hitchcock intended to do something new, make a picture without cuts. There were really 10 separate shots, each lasting around 10 minutes, the maximum length that a reel of film could accommodate. But the entire picture appeared to be filmed in a single continuous take. What did he do to cover up the wounds? To begin the following reel, he shifted the camera to focus on someone's back or an object, such as a piece of furniture. To add realism to his first foray into color filmmaking, he had the sky outside the window shift from afternoon to nightfall. It seemed as if the walls, the performers, and the camera were all dancing to the same beat. While some dismissed it as a passing fad, reviewers eventually came to see it as a watershed moment in cinema, to which 2014's Birdman owes a debt. Hitchcock received 34 Academy Award nominations for his films between 1940 and 1949. He had 3 nods for Best Director, 11 for Rebecca, and 6 for Foreign Correspondent. In 1945, he received his second nomination for Lifeboat, a film that never left a single boat. Following that, Spellbound arrived, including Salvador Dali's strange dream sequences, and garnered 6 further nominations. However, Hitchcock never once heard his name called as he watched other people ascend to the stage. Much later, in an effort to rectify the situation, the American Film Institute proclaimed Rebecca to be among the most exciting films of all time and named Mrs. Danvers, the film's villain, one of the all-time greats. Hitchcock had a hard time swallowing it at the time. Everything changed in 1955 when Hitchcock switched on a television camera. The television series Alfred Hitchcock Presents did more than make Hitchcock famous. It catapulted him into the public eye. With a straight face and a supply of dry humor, he presented each program personally. At the beginning of each episode, his 9-line cartoon silhouette would appear. One of TV's most iconic pictures was that skit. William Friedkin was one of the directors whom Hitchcock coached behind the scenes. Additionally, he delighted in making fun of the sponsors. For example, he once made a joke about the lack of an electric chair leading to a postponement of an execution. The sponsors scowled, but they persisted despite the audience's laughter. Runtime for the program was close to 10 years. His 1962 NBC show, The Alfred Hitchcock Hour, was lengthier. In 1965, the show finale broadcast. Back then, Hitchcock was more than simply a filmmaker. He was a household name. His prime was in the 1950s. Hitchcock ultimately broke away from Selznick's influence and released 11 pictures between 1953 and 1960. His collaborations with Grace Kelly on the smash singles Dial M for Murder, Rear Window, and To Catch a Thief were consecutive. He was nominated for Best Director again for Rear Window. In 1958, Vertigo was released. Despite initial disapproval, it eventually became the most beloved film of all time, according to the critics at Sight and Sound. And then, in 1959, when all seemed lost, Hitchcock made a triumphant return with North by Northwest. It made $44,056 in only 2 weeks, which is equivalent to about $4.44 million today, shattering box office records at Radio City Music Hall. With Psycho, he closed off the decade. More people were scared by it, it altered the course of horror films, and it was his most financially successful film to date. Let alone the entire shower scene, it became a cinematic classic. Hitchcock was not, however, the sole creator. After Rear Window, To Catch a Thief, The Trouble with Harry, and The Man Who Knew Too Much, he collaborated closely with writer John Michael Hayes, on a string of 4 top successes. There was more comedy and a lighter tone in those movies. Although Hitchcock minimized Hayes's part in interviews, he referred to him as just a radio writer at one point. He continued to collaborate with reliable performers like James Stewart, Cary Grant, and Grace Kelly. Among the Hitchcock blondes, Grace became known for her air of mystery, ice-coldness, and elegance. Not everything went according to plan when I was behind the camera. Montgomery Clift employed method acting on I Confess, which was something that Hitchcock despised. Rather than improvising, he preferred accuracy. The final product captures the suspense. Of course, Hitchcock had his flaws. In 1961, it all began when he crossed the line. After seeing Tippi Hedren in only one television advertisement, Alfred Hitchcock cast her as his next leading lady. A 7-year contract, which was intimate, personal, and exclusive, was imposed on her within weeks. What started out as casting soon evolved into something else entirely. In 1962, as filming of The Birds began, the crew could already sense it. It wasn't simply that Hitchcock was directing her, he was constantly observing her. When she shared a laugh with a male crew member, he would become distant. His attention was piqued whenever she lingered with a person. To get a feel for her mind, he hired private investigators to follow her around, had a graphologist examine her handwriting, and even drove by her house in the middle of the night. "This isn't normal," co-star Suzanne Pettet remarked one day, but by the time she got to her, it was too late. What Tippi dressed, her behavior, and the people she could speak to were all under Hitchcock's supervision. It became even worse, and she compared it to a mental jail. She made an appearance in March 1963 to film the scene in the attic for The Birds. The actual wild, furious birds were waiting for her in a cage constructed into the entrance for 5 days, 8 hours a day. She had been promised mechanical birds. They were hurled at her. Some of them grazed her flesh, while others were entangled in her mane. They attached birds to her outfit on the 6th day. One of them nearly pecked out her eye. Crying, she fell on the floor. Despite Hitchcock's best efforts, a doctor had recommended bed rest. Despite Cary Grant's whispered words, "You're the bravest woman I've ever seen," a visit to the set did not alleviate the worst aspect of filming, what occurred off camera during the shoot. Hitchcock's fixation became bodily. He attempted to kiss her one day as they were taken to the set in a limousine as he got on top of her. In 1963, there was no method to report sexual harassment, and no one had a phrase for it, so she just pushed him away. She did not say a word. In 1964, with their following picture Marnie, things took a dark turn. He re-grabbed her and touched her in ways that made her sick one day in his workplace. She said he threatened her professional career, made sexually explicit comments, and whispered naughty desires to her. His aggressiveness escalated as she retreated. She finally snapped and yelled, "No!" That was her last word. With an intense stare, he said, "I will destroy your career." And his threat came true. After starring in 2 big films, she was 34 years old and quickly climbing the Hollywood ladder, but she went without acting work for 2 years. She was still technically under contract, so he couldn't allow anybody else cast her, but he also flat-out refused to collaborate with her. Hitchcock turned down the producer's requests for her. No way. Tippi's time has come and gone. She went back to doing little parts on television, which was far from the breakthrough role she had hoped for. Hitchcock spent the entire time in a big but humble mansion in Bel Air, which he had purchased for $40,000 in 1942. An antique English rural house was its appearance. As a dramatic gesture, he presented his wife with the home key in a pocketbook on her birthday. Encircled by trees, the home was obscured from view from the street. Up until his passing in 1980, he remained there. Also, eating was something he had an odd fixation with. He had a meal in the 1920s when the soup, chicken, and bread were all colored blue. Pastas with names like ragu of reptile and morgue mussels appeared at a haunted dinner he held later on. He had an aversion to cold eggs, cheese, and meat, likely stemming from an incident in his youth. But at home, life was easy. Alma made the meals, their daughter washed the dishes, and they relaxed with some music, books, and TV. Quiet routines instead of a tennis court and pool. Alfred Hitchcock wasn't only a director of suspense, he was suspense himself. There was a hidden chamber within his Bel Air estate. Very few people were aware of it. A secret office, not only disguised behind a door, but so ingeniously laid up that visitors had no clue it existed, was nestled upstairs in the house's more than 7,200 square feet. In 1942, not long after the house was completed, he purchased it and ensured that the subterranean chamber was plumbed for an ensuite. For someone whose reputation was founded on secrecy, it was the ideal setting, peaceful and secluded. His room was more than a place. It reflected his values. Hitchcock actually made use of this clandestine office from the early 1940s until his death. This secret abode on the upper floor served as his art studio. In that very location, he worked on the scripts for Rope, Vertigo, and Rear Window. Before anybody else saw the finished result, his wife Alma was there, rewriting texts and checking storyboards. It transformed into a guest bedroom with plumbing for an ensuite, so it could quickly switch roles as required. His reliable set decorator, Emile Coury, and production designer, Henry Bumstead, collaborated on its design. They made meticulous, adaptable, and modular use of the space, much like a film set. Hitchcock meticulously planned the room's layout, using elements such as staircases, shadows, and windows to great effect. That line of thinking extended to the workplace as well. It was designed to blend in with its surroundings, and the lighting reflected the tone he frequently employed in his films. Later on, this kind of architecture was dubbed schizoid, reflecting the fact that his protagonists frequently hid items in plain sight. The lecturer went so far as to say that Hitchcock's houses were symbols in and of themselves, with the staircase representing the story's spine, the windows representing the eyes, the basement housing secrets, and this office serving as a secret inside a secret. The mansion underwent renovations in 1983 following Hitchcock's death in 1980, but the room remained. Following his ownership, it remained unchanged. Even when the property sold for $8.81 million in 2023, much more than the asking price, that room was still a big selling element. It had transformed into a filmic artifact by that point, going beyond its original function as a secret office. A construction and lumber businessman who had owned it before decided not to touch it either. A modest, serene room created for a guy who famously quipped, "Drama is life with the dull bits cut out." The room had weathered the Hollywood fashions of the last few decades. Slowing down was a hallmark of Hitchcock's latter years as an actor. Only 4 of his films, Frenzy, Torn Curtain, Topaz, and Family Plot, were produced between 1966 and 1976. Following the success of his films from the 1960s, he returned to London for 1972's Frenzy, which received overwhelmingly positive reviews. The fact that it made $12.6 million after just spending $2 million on production proved that he was still capable. Produced at a cost of $4.5 million, his final feature, 1976's Family Plot, was a black comedy with John Williams' score. Following that, he began but never completed his last feature picture, The Short Night, which was to be about a British spy. His health deteriorated when he fired one writer and recruited another. He was unable to film a single sequence. Even though he had stepped down as director, he was still very well remembered. The American Film Institute presented Hitchcock with their Life Achievement Award on March 7, 1979. Ingrid Bergman presided over the event, which was broadcast on CBS, and became one of those unusual occasions in Hollywood when all the major players were present. Jimmy Stewart sat on one side, Cary Grant on the other. On hand were the likes of Anthony Perkins, Janet Leigh, Sean Connery, and Barbra Streisand. Instead of expressing gratitude to studios or executives, Hitchcock merely mentioned, "The first is a film editor, the second is a script writer, the third is the mother of my daughter Pat, and the fourth is as fine a cook as ever performed miracles in a domestic kitchen," which was his whole address. As for his wife, her name is Alma Reveal. Alfred Hitchcock passed away peacefully while sleeping on April 29, 1980, 1 year subsequent. He was 80 years old. The time was 9:17 a.m. Kidney failure, which he had been fighting for months, was the root cause. Years before, on set of Frenzy, Alma had a stroke that left her comatose and unable to speak. Throughout her dying years, they both became silent. Beverly Hills Good Shepherd Catholic Church was the site of his funeral. Present were more than 600 individuals present to say their goodbyes, including Mel Brooks, Tippi Hedren, and Francois Truffaut. Afterwards, his quiet passing occurred as if it had been a scene from one of his films. His ashes were spread over the Pacific Ocean.